Stop right there. If you're watching this video and you hold dual citizenship, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say, because the next 30 days could determine whether you keep both of your passports or lose one of them forever. I'm not exaggerating. There's a new law that just went into effect, and most dual citizens have absolutely no idea it exists. In fact, over 60% of dual nationals haven't registered yet, and the deadline is approaching fast. By the time most people find out about this, it'll be too late. The penalties include fines up to $50,000, passport revocation, and even criminal charges. So if you've ever thought about clicking away from a YouTube video, don't do it now. The next 15 minutes could literally save you from financial and legal disaster. And before we go any further, do me a favor. Screenshot this video right now and send it to anyone you know who has dual citizenship, because what I'm about to share could change their life. So before we dive in, if this information helps you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone you know who holds dual citizenship. This is genuinely one of those situations where sharing could literally save someone from serious legal or financial consequences down the road. All right, let's get into it. First, let me give you the foundation of what's actually happening here. This new law represents the most significant overhaul of dual citizenship regulations in over 40 years. It's the result of years of international cooperation between multiple countries trying to close loopholes, address security concerns, and, frankly, make sure they can track and tax their citizens no matter where in the world they live. The law affects dual nationals from dozens of countries, though the specific requirements vary depending on which passports you hold. The core of this legislation centers around something called mandatory citizenship disclosure and reciprocal enforcement agreements. Now, I know those sound like boring legal terms, but stay with me because this is where it gets real. Under the new law, if you hold citizenship in 2 or more countries, you are now required to actively declare all of your citizenships to each country where you hold a passport. And I'm not talking about just mentioning it casually at the border. I'm talking about formal registration through official government portals, with documentation, with verification, and with ongoing updates whenever your status changes. Here's what makes this different from anything we've seen before. In the past, most countries operated on a sort of don't ask, don't tell policy when it came to dual citizenship. Sure, they knew some people had multiple passports, but unless you were doing something to draw attention to yourself, they didn't really care which passport you used when or what you were doing in your other country of citizenship. That era is over. The new law creates interconnected databases where countries share information about dual nationals. If you're registered as a citizen in country A and country B, both countries now know about it, and more importantly, they share information about your activities, your tax filings, your legal issues, all of it. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. Say you're a dual citizen of the United States and Canada. Under the old system, you could use your U.S. passport when entering the U.S. and your Canadian passport when entering Canada, and for the most part, those two systems didn't talk to each other. Starting in February, when you register under the new law, both countries will have access to a shared profile about you. If you file taxes in the U.S. but haven't filed in Canada, the Canadian Tax Authority will know. If you have a legal issue in Canada, U.S. authorities will be notified. If you apply for government benefits in one country, the other country can see that information and potentially challenge your eligibility. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what if I just don't register? What if I keep doing what I've always done and fly under the radar? And I need to be really clear about this. That is a terrible idea, and here's why. The penalties for non-compliance are severe. We're talking about fines that can reach into the tens of thousands of dollars, potential passport revocation, and in some cases, even criminal charges. But more than that, the enforcement mechanisms are already in place. These countries have been building this infrastructure for years. They have facial recognition technology at airports. They have data sharing agreements with banks and financial institutions. They have algorithms that flag suspicious patterns. You will get caught. It's just a matter of when. The registration deadline is critical, and this is where a lot of people are going to get tripped up. The law technically takes effect February 1st, but that doesn't mean you have until February 1st to register. The registration window actually opened 3 months ago, back in November, and it closes on March 31st. That gives dual nationals a 5-month window to complete the process. If you miss that deadline, you move into a penalty phase where the registration fees increase dramatically, and you could face additional scrutiny from immigration authorities. The registration process itself is actually more complicated than most people realize. It's not just filling out a form online. You need to gather documentation proving your citizenship in each country, certified copies of birth certificates, naturalization papers, previous passports, everything. You need to provide a comprehensive travel history for the past 10 years. And yes, they can verify this through border crossing databases, so don't even think about fudging those dates. You need to submit tax returns from both countries for the past 5 years. You need to disclose any criminal record, any pending legal matters, any bankruptcy filings, basically a complete financial and legal background check. And here's something that's catching a lot of people off guard. If you have children who are dual citizens, even minor children, they need to be registered separately. Parents can submit on behalf of their kids, but each child needs their own registration file, their own documentation, and their own tracking number in the system. I've talked to families with 3 or 4 dual citizen kids, and they're looking at weeks of paperwork just to get everyone properly registered. Let's talk about the tax implications, because this is where things get really complicated and potentially very expensive. One of the main drivers behind this new law is tax enforcement. Countries are tired of dual citizens playing the system, earning income in one country, claiming residency in another to get better tax treatment, and generally making it hard for tax authorities to figure out who owes what. The new law introduces something called the Primary Tax Residence Declaration. Essentially, you have to choose one country as your primary tax residence, and that determines which country gets first crack at taxing your worldwide income. But here's the catch, and this is huge. Just because you declare one country as your primary tax residence doesn't mean the other country can't tax you too. If you're a U.S. citizen, for example, the U.S. taxes your worldwide income regardless of where you live. That doesn't change under the new law. What does change is that now the U.S. and your other country of citizenship share all of your financial information, so both countries can make sure they're getting what they believe they're owed. This could lead to situations where dual citizens face increased tax burdens because both countries are more aggressively pursuing what they see as their fair share. There are some provisions in the law for tax credits and deductions to prevent true double taxation, but navigating these is incredibly complex. I strongly recommend that any dual citizen watching this video schedule a consultation with a tax professional who specializes in international taxation law, preferably someone who has experience with both of your countries of citizenship. This is not a DIY situation. The potential for costly mistakes is just too high. Another major change involves military service obligations. Several countries with dual citizenship agreements have mandatory military service requirements. In the past, dual citizens could sometimes avoid service in one country by claiming they fulfilled their obligation in another country, or by simply staying out of the country that required service. The new law closes these loopholes. If you're a male dual citizen of a country with mandatory service and you're within the age range for service, you need to either complete that service, apply for a formal exemption, or pay an alternative service fee. Some countries are allowing dual citizens to satisfy their service requirement through extended civil service programs, but you have to proactively apply for these programs. They won't automatically grant you an exemption just because you hold another passport. Travel is another area that's seeing significant changes. Under the old system, you could use whichever passport was most convenient for your travel plans. Traveling to a country that has visa-free access for country A but not country B, just use your country A passport. That flexibility is being restricted. The new law requires that when traveling between your countries of citizenship, you must use the passport of the country you're entering. So if you're a British-Australian dual citizen flying from London to Sydney, you must enter Australia on your Australian passport and enter the UK on your British passport. If you try to enter either country on the wrong passport, you could be denied entry or face questioning and delays at immigration. For travel to third countries, you still have some flexibility, but you're now required to report which passport you used for each trip when you do your annual citizenship status update. Yes, you read that right. Annual updates. Part of the law requires dual citizens to file an annual status report confirming their current address, their employment status, any changes in marital status or dependents, and their travel history. It's basically like filing a tax return, but for your citizenship status. Let's talk about what happens if you're involved in legal issues, because this is where the law gets really serious. If you're arrested or charged with a crime in one of your countries of citizenship, the other country is automatically notified. Depending on the severity of the offense and the specific agreements between your two countries, you could potentially face legal consequences in both places. For example, if you're convicted of a serious crime in one country, the other country might revoke certain privileges, deny you entry, or even pursue their own charges if the conduct would be illegal under their laws too. The law also addresses something that's been a gray area for decades: renunciation of citizenship. Some people, faced with the complexity and cost of maintaining dual citizenship under these new rules, are going to consider giving up one of their passports. The new law makes renunciation more difficult and more expensive. There are now mandatory cooling-off periods, counseling requirements, and significant fees. The U.S., for example, has increased its renunciation fee to nearly $3,000, and you have to be up to date on all your tax obligations before they'll even process your renunciation. You can't just walk away from your citizenship to avoid complying with the new law. For dual citizens who inherited their citizenship, maybe you were born in one country but raised in another, or one of your parents was from a different country and you automatically got their citizenship, this situation